Isn't it curious? We've cracked the genetic code, we've sent telescopes so far into space they can peer back in time billions of years to the very formation of galaxies. We've landed robotic explorers on comets, mapped the brain's electrical activity, and can now simulate entire planetary climates with algorithms. And yet somehow we still struggle with the basic act of being alone with our thoughts. In a world where the average person holds more processing power in their pocket than NASA used to send astronauts to the moon, we still haven't quite figured out how to process our own emotional terrain. We scroll, we swipe. We consume more data than any species in history, yet much of it just ricochets off the surface of awareness. We live in what could be the most connected time in human existence, and yet the loneliness index keeps rising. Why? That right there is the paradox of our age. And as a scientist, I find paradoxes irresistible because they hint that something fundamental is out of alignment, not just in our machines, but in our minds. You see, we're not simply standing at the edge of technological progress. We're approaching what might be the most significant psychological and civilizational threshold since the dawn of Homo sapiens. The need to evolve not our tools, but our thinking. The phrase New Earth might sound poetic or even metaphysical, but it points to a real observable shift, not in planetary geography, but in collective cognition, in how we assign value, in how we define meaning, in what we consider intelligent behavior, not just in machines, but in ourselves. Now, science doesn't deal in prophecy, but it does recognize patterns, and when enough data accumulates environmental disruption, neurological overload, political gridlock, existential unrest, something becomes clear. The system is being stressed, and any system under prolonged stress either adapts or collapses. The good news? Human consciousness is not fixed. Neuroplasticity shows us that even adult brains can rewire. Sociology shows us that cultures can shift. Evolutionary biology reminds us that transformation is not only possible, it's required if a species is to survive in a changing environment. So the idea of a new Earth isn't about utopia, it's about adaptation. And the question becomes, are we willing to participate in that adaptation, not just passively, but intentionally? Because if we don't direct the evolution of our awareness, the entropy of our inattention will do it for us. And unlike gravitational collapse, this shift won't be visible on a seismograph. It happens internally, like a star that reorganizes under pressure before bursting into light. Let's clarify something. The new Earth is not a second Earth orbiting on the other side of the sun. It's not a sci-fi concept, and it's not a spiritual dimension you access by burning incense and aligning chakras. It's something more radical and more measurable. It's a shift in the dominant operating system of human consciousness. Like tectonic plates sliding slowly beneath our feet, this shift happens without headlines. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks, but with friction between what we value and what we do, between the tools we've built and the wisdom we've neglected, between our capacity to simulate reality and our inability to sit still in it. Just as planetary systems collapse into new formations under gravitational stress, civilizations evolve when their structures, economic, political, cultural, become too unstable to sustain their prior state. This is not moral judgment, it's thermodynamics. Systems that overextend or fail to adapt eventually reach a tipping point. And when that happens, energy reorganizes. That's what we're experiencing now. Not the end of the world, but the entropy of an old operating system. The old Earth, metaphorically speaking, was built on separation, hierarchy, scarcity. The idea that to survive, we must compete, that progress demands extraction. That identity must be fixed, and power must be centralized. But physics doesn't agree. The deeper we probe the quantum realm, the more interdependence we find. The more we observe the cosmos, the more we see that stability doesn't come from rigidity, but from dynamic equilibrium systems in balance, not domination. So, the new Earth is not a fantasy. It is a possible outcoming configuration of society where our technologies, behaviors, and values align with the natural laws we already know govern sustainable systems. And to get there, no spacecraft is required. Only one thing is you must change your orbit. Now, when I say orbit, I don't mean the path of your body around the sun. I mean the trajectory of your attention, your habits, your assumptions, the gravitational field of your consciousness. Because here's what most people forget. You're not a passive object in the universe. You're not just made of stardust. You're made of laws. Physics applies to your mind just as it does to matter. Entropy, inertia, resonance, feedback loops, these aren't just textbook terms. They're active within your nervous system, your thoughts, your culture. Which means evolution isn't something that just happens to you. It's something you participate in or resist. So let's talk about what it means to change your orbit. In celestial mechanics, an object changes its orbit only when acted upon by a foreseen impulse, a burn, a gravitational assist. The same is true for you. Your current orbit of thought, behavior, worldview will continue indefinitely unless some force intervenes. That force could be trauma, crisis, curiosity, or, if you're lucky, awareness. But here's the twist. Unlike planets, you're not at the mercy of external thrust. You possess what physicists call agency, the ability to apply internal force to redirect your own trajectory by sheer will and understanding. And that makes you unusual. Stars don't choose to shine. Galaxies don't decide to swirl. But you have the ability to observe your own behavior, reflect on it, and adjust. That's not mystical. That's evolutionary biology colliding with cognitive neuroscience. You are a self-aware arrangement of atoms in a universe mostly made of silence. You are not just matter, you are matter that can wonder, matter that can choose. So when we talk about shifting into a new Earth, we're really talking about a large-scale application of this individual capacity. The collective shift begins with individual pivots. Not dramatic revolutions, but subtle recalibrations. Where do I place my attention? What systems do I uphold? What emotions do I transmit into the world? Because consciousness is not just something you have, it's something you broadcast. And just as a tuning fork causes other objects to resonate at its frequency, your internal state influences the people around you. Not metaphorically, measurably. Mirror neurons, emotional contagion, social fields. These are not fringe theories. They are observable phenomena in psychology and physics. And they suggest something profound, that your coherence contributes to collective coherence. So if your inner life is fragmented, anxious, performative, don't be surprised if your outer world echoes the same patterns. That's not a judgment, that's feedback. Now, some people will hear all this and say, okay, but what does any of this have to do with the future of the planet? The answer is everything. Because all of our problems, climate instability, political polarization, technological misuse, they don't emerge from nature. They emerge from perception, from a way of seeing the world that is outdated, from an operating system rooted in separation rather than interconnection. And if we don't upgrade that system, not just technologically, but perceptually, then no amount of innovation will save us. We'll simply use brilliant tools to reinforce primitive behaviors. We'll build rockets while ignoring refugees. We'll train AI to predict markets, but not to understand empathy. We'll terraform Mars before we know how to live in peace on Earth. But imagine the opposite. Imagine if our scientific intelligence was matched by emotional intelligence. If our exploration of outer space was accompanied by an equally ambitious exploration of inner space, not as an escape, but as integration. Then we would build civilizations that reflect the cosmos not just in complexity, but in coherence. So let's begin with the most fundamental force you have control over: your attention. If the cosmos has taught us anything, it's that where energy flows, structure follows. Stars form in clouds of gas that begin to collapse or not, randomly but around centers of gravity. Attention works the same way. It collapses potential into pattern. It shapes the structure of your mind, your memory, your meaning making. Neuroscience backs this. What you repeatedly focus on strengthens its neural circuits. It's called Hebbian learning. Neurons that fire together wire together. So if you spend your mental bandwidth on outrage, insecurity, or manufactured drama, your brain obliges. It becomes better at anxiety, at division, at confirmation bias. But the opposite is also true. If you direct your attention toward patterns of coherence, toward curiosity, generosity, patience, those traits become reinforced. Not because of magic, because of biology. Your nervous system is plastic, not like a bottle, like a sculptor. It changes based on what you feed it, which means that attention is not just passive perception, it's a creative force. And this has massive implications, because if your internal state shapes your brain, and your brain shapes your actions, and your actions shape the world, then you are quite literally a cosmic feedback loop, a living experiment in recursive influence. So the real revolution isn't external, it's attentional. This isn't philosophy, this is physics. And yet, we've built entire economies based on hijacking attention. Entire industries dedicated to fragmenting your focus, monetizing your reactivity, converting your inner orbit into someone else's profit. This is not a conspiracy. It's capitalism, and it's brilliantly effective. But it leaves you disoriented. Why? Because your brain was not designed for infinite stimulation. It evolved for survival in small, information-scarce tribes. When you expose it to 10, 0 ads per day, infinite scroll, and algorithmic manipulation, it doesn't expand. It fractures. And fractured attention leads to fractured identity. So reclaiming your attention isn't just a productivity hack, it's an act of civilizational hygiene. It's mental astrophysics. It's saying, I will no longer allow my mind to be shaped by the gravitational pull of lowest common denominator algorithms. Instead, you become your own center of mass. You decide what orbits you. You decide which thoughts get your cognitive gravity, which ideas gain acceleration, which values stabilize your axis. This is sovereignty, not as a political ideal, as a neurological imperative. Because if you don't take the authorship of your attention, someone else will. And in that case, you're not living, you're being lived, programmed, pulled, rendered reactive by signals you didn't choose to believe in. But the universe didn't build you to be reactive. It built you to be reflective. And reflection, true, clear, conscious self-awareness is a trait so rare in nature, it ought to be protected like a fragile biosphere. It's not a weakness. It's a cosmic upgrade. Now, let's talk about energy, not in the mystical sense, in the literal, measurable, joule and hertz sense. You are an electromagnetic being. Your heart emits an electrical field strong enough to be detected feet away from your body. Your brain operates via oscillations. Your cells communicate through ionic gradients. Every thought you have is a current. Every emotion, a frequency pattern. This isn't the New Age. It's biophysics. And here's where it gets interesting. Those patterns aren't isolated. You're not a closed system. You are a porous interface in constant exchange with your environment. You influence and are influenced emotionally, chemically, socially, NGS electromagnetically. We see this in neuroscience, mirror neurons, in psychology, emotional contagion, in quantum physics, entanglement at subatomic scales. Across disciplines, a pattern emerges. Connection is not optional, it's structural. So what does that mean for your evolution? It means that the state of your internal field, your coherence or incoherenzitos, it stops with you. It radiates. It contributes to a larger social field. And just as local weather can affect global climate over time, your micro emotions shape macro patterns in culture. Let me put it this way. Your anxiety is not a private event. Your calm is not trivial. Your clarity is not cosmetic. These states have gravitational pull. They entrain the fields of others. And when enough individuals stabilize in a new pattern, that pattern scales. Sociology calls this emergence. Physics calls it phase transition. Either way, it's how systems shift. You want to change the world? Stop underestimating your signal. But don't confuse signals with noise. We live in an age where signal-to-noise ratios are at historic lows, where outrage spreads faster than insight, where sarcasm is mistaken for sophistication, and where performance often substitutes for presence. That's why your stillness matters. Because in a turbulent field, even a small, coherent signal stands out. It anchors, it harmonizes, like a tuning fork in a storm. So the real power of self-regulation of emotional intelligence is not personal peace, it's field stabilization. When you regulate your nervous system, you're not just healing yourself, you're increasing the probability of collective coherence. That's not hyperbole, that's the resonance. And resonance, when scaled, becomes culture. So no, the world won't be saved by slogans. It won't be saved by clever tweets or viral trends. It will be saved if it is to be saved by quiet, coherent minds, by humans who choose not to amplify chaos, but to entrain clarity. And clarity is contagious. Let's now consider the structure of the self not as philosophy, but as systems theory. You are a nested organism, a system within systems. Your cells form tissues. Your tissues form organs. Your organs form networks. But what binds all of it isn't just chemistry. It's information flow. It's coherence. When the parts of a system communicate in synchrony, we call that health. When they lose synchrony, we call it disease. And the same applies to your psyche. When your beliefs, emotions, and actions are harmonized, when they orbit around a common axis, we call that integrity. But when they're in contradiction, when what you feel is silenced by what you say, and what you say is contradicted by what you doubt, call that incoherence. It's not just morally uncomfortable, it's biologically unstable. Why? Because internal contradiction consumes energy. It's like driving with one foot on the gas and one on the brake. Over time, the system overheats. You burn out, you fragment. And in that fragmentation, you become susceptible not just to illness, but to manipulation. Because a fragmented system is easier to control from outside. So if we want to stabilize into what some call the new earth, the first requirement is not external revolution, it's internal integration. Integration doesn't mean perfection. It doesn't mean moral superiority. It means structural alignment. It means that your thoughts, your feelings, and your behaviors form a coherent loop. Feedback reinforces forward motion. Insight becomes action. Action becomes feedback. Feedback becomes growth. That's how systems evolve. And this is where evolution becomes intentional. Because unlike a galaxy or a virus, you can choose to become more coherent. You can observe your patterns, revise your inputs, and upgrade your internal architecture. You are a self-editing universe. And that's rare. Let me remind you, most matter in the cosmos just is. Hydrogen doesn't wonder if it should change careers. Black holes don't rethink their boundaries. But you get to reflect. You get to redirect entropy into structure. You get to turn random experience into deliberate evolution. That's not spiritual poetry. That's thermodynamic agency. But agency doesn't mean comfort. In physics, transformation always requires energy input. You don't boil water without heat. You don't form stars without pressure. You don't rewire neural circuits without friction. So when people ask, why does growth feel so hard? The answer is, because it is. Resistance is not failure, it's part of the formula. Even the universe began with violent expansion. They call it the Big Bang for a reason. So yes, your personal evolution will require upheaval, unlearning, repatterning. But remember, chaos is not the enemy. It's the signal that something is about to reorganize. Now, let's address a misconception as old as human storytelling. The myth of clean separation. For millennia, we've tried to divide the universe and ourselves into binaries, light and dark, good and evil, matter and spirit, logic and emotion. But the more deeply we study the cosmos, the more those lines blur. Take light, for example. In quantum mechanics, light is not either a wave or a particle. It is both, simultaneously, until observed. And even then, its collapse is an interaction, not a confession. Take matters. What feels solid? Your chair, your bones, your coffee muges, 99.9999999% empty space. It's held together not by substance, but by forces, fields, probabilities. And take your brain. We used to think emotions lived on one side and logic on the other, but neuroimaging has shown they're intertwined. You don't make good decisions without emotion. You don't feel deeply without cognitive framing. So what does all of this tell us? That opposites are not enemies. They're entangled. And the same applies to you. You are not just the good parts of yourself, not just the enlightened thoughts, not just the curated identity on your social feed. You are also afraid, also doubt, also a contradiction. But here's the breakthrough. That complexity is not dysfunction. It's quantum structure. It means you are dynamic, not static, capable of adaptation, not bound by labels. In science, systems that hold contradictory states without collapsing are called superpositions. They contain more information, more potential. They are not broken, they are rich. So stop trying to exile your shadows. They are not foreign invaders, they are data. You don't outgrow fear by pretending it doesn't exist. You metabolize it, you examine its origin, you observe its behavior, and in doing so, you reclaim its energy. This is not spiritual bypassing. It's energetic conservation. In physics, energy is never lost, only transformed. And the same is true of your internal life. Every unresolved trauma, every suppressed emotion, every denied part of you doesn't disappear. It distorts until you bring it into coherence. And this, perhaps, is the most radical idea of all. That healing is not erasure, it's integration. It's allowing your wave and your particle to coexist. Your silence and your expression. Your collapse and your expansion. Because only a whole system can stabilize a field. And only a stable field can contribute to evolution. Somewhere along our evolutionary timeline, we made a category error. We assumed that advancement was external, that the next leap forward for humanity would come from hardware upgrades, faster computation, or colonizing other planets. That the solution to our problems would arrive in the form of new code, new devices, new systems. But history and science tell a more nuanced story. Our true evolution was never meant to be outsourced to circuitry. It was meant to be internal, evolution of perception, of awareness, of how we interpret information before we act upon it. In astrophysics, we don't build better telescopes just to see more star sway, build them to see farther back in time. To understand not just what is, but what was, and by extension, what will be. The same is true of introspection. You don't look inward to admire your reflection. You look inward to adjust your course, to correct for drift, to realign with the trajectory that biology, logic, and empathy all suggest we're meant to follow. So, what does that mean in practical terms? It means we must reevaluate how we use the most precious resource in the known universe, attention. In physics, attention is analogous to gravity. It organizes chaos into form. It collapses uncertainty into clarity. And like any force, it has consequences. Where you direct it determines what grows in the landscape of your life. We are now realizing what sages intuited, and neuroscientists confirm attention sculpts the mind. It wires neural circuits. It defines identity. It creates feedback loops that become behavior, then culture, then history. So if we wish to author a different future, we must become rigorous custodians of what we feed our minds. Every scroll, every swipe, every comment we chase, each one is an input, a gravitational nudge to the orbit of thought. You are not separate from the collective. You are a fractal of it, a node in the network. And how you manage your mental ecology becomes a micro expression of how the planet manages its systems. Because coherence is not just a property of sound or science, it's a necessity of civilization. And this isn't speculation, it's not a metaphor, it's physics, it's resonance, it's the very nature of systems, biological, social, even planetary. When physicists speak of resonance, they refer to a state of amplified alignment. Two frequencies that match don't just coexist, they amplify each other. This applies not only to sound waves or electromagnetic fields, but to behavior, emotion, and human consciousness at scale. You may have heard it called quantum entanglement, but don't let the buzzword distract you. What it truly means is that certain phenomenons connected can remain correlated even when separated by vast distances. And that principle, while mysterious in quantum mechanics, echoes metaphorically in how culture behaves. We don't live in isolation, never have. Our minds are not vacuum sealed. Every belief, every emotional state, every ethical stance we carry radiates. It enters the social field, like gravitational waves from a cosmic collision, small perhaps, but real, measurable, accumulative. That's what people overlook when they ask, what difference can one person make? The answer lies in field theory. Enough coherence in one place can stabilize complexity elsewhere. In system science, this is called critical mass. The new Earth, if we're bold enough to use that phrase, as not a fantasy. It's a coherent configuration of higher functioning systems. It is a field of collective awareness made possible by personal resonance. But it can't be downloaded. It must be uploaded through intention, through ethical practice, through inner alignment. This is what most futurists forget. The future doesn't arrive just because we demand it. It manifests when we synchronize with the underlying architecture that allows it to exist. The fastest path to changing the world is not panic. It's presence. It's calibration. It's adjusting your personal instrument to match the frequency of the reality you wish to build. This kind of presence is rare in a world addicted to reaction. It is not loud, it is not flashy, it does not trend, but it is powerful because it doesn't just resist entropy, it reverses it. It introduces order, clarity, coherence into a system increasingly dominated by noise. And in the language of systems theory, that makes you not just a participant, but a stabilizer. Something is happening. You don't need to be a scientist to feel it. You just need to be paying attention. The shift isn't loud, it's subtle, like background radiation, like the gravitational tug of a distant planet you can't see, but can measure by its effect on everything else. You feel it in conversations that are finally being had, in the quiet implosions of outdated systems, in the questions children ask that we didn't have the language to pose just a generation ago. These aren't glitches, they're signatures, early data points of a system reconfiguring itself. But let's be honest, transformation on this scale isn't designed to make you comfortable. It's not meant to be elegant or easily monetized. It won't reward your ego. In fact, it may dismantle everything you once clung to for identity. And that's precisely the point. Because the new Earth, if such a configuration is to stabilize, won't be built atop the scaffolding of old metrics, dominance, division, distraction. It will be founded on resonance, on coherence, on individuals who no longer outsource power to systems that no longer serve life. It will emerge from those who have done the inner calculus not to become superior, but to become sane. And that process begins with humility, not performative modesty, but the kind of humility born of cosmic perspective, the kind that looks up at the stars and remembers, I am made of this, and yet I can choose. That's the paradox of being human. You are small in scale, yet vast in consequence. You are finite in body, yet infinite in influence. Because you don't just belong to the Earth, you are part of its cognition, its feedback loop, its reflective capacity. The breath you exhale was once inside trees. The calcium in your bones was forged in long-dead stars. Your consciousness is a brief flare in a vast thermodynamic process, and yet, what you think, what you feel, and what you do ripples outward into systems far beyond your knowing. And so, what you choose to carry emotionally, cognitively, ethically, is not trivial. It is planetary. So if you wish to embody this emerging world, start here. Stop giving your sovereignty to systems that reward only performance. Stop waiting for the media to validate your insight. Stop asking culture to applaud your inner clarity. Because evolution doesn't reward appearances, it rewards alignment. You become the field, the tuning fork, the gravitational reference point for those still spinning in reactive cycles. Not because you shout louder, but because you hum clearer. That is the new model of leadership. Not dominators, not saviors, but resonators. Humans whose presence regulates rather than inflames, whose coherence calms turbulence, whose nervous systems don't react but respond, whose existence becomes a kind of gentle gravity. And that too is physics. Systems stabilize when they encounter a higher order of coherence. And yes, you can become that stabilizing agent, not by transcending your flaws, but by integrating them. Because coherence isn't about perfection, it's about internal agreement, about wholeness. And wholeness comes when you stop splitting yourself in two between worthy and unworthy, light and shadow, human and divine. You are both. You are wave and particle, collapse and emergence. You are not here to escape contradiction. You are here to hold it wisely. That's the real initiation. Not escape, embodiment. Not dissociation, engagement. Not more information. Integration, because Earth never needed more escape routes. It needed more rootedness, not intellectual escape velocity, but ethical orbit. And that starts in the micro moments, in the breath before reaction, in the small acts of compassion when no one is watching, in the decisions made not for applause, but for alignment. That's where the new Earth begins. Not in a global summit, not in a marketing campaign, but in your nervous system, in your perception, in the subtle gravitational field you emit through every thought, word, and action. And yes, it will be quiet, but it will be real, and it will ripple outward the way gravitational waves ripple from the collisions of stars. Because this isn't just about your enlightenment, it's about the phase transition of a civilization, from separation to resonance, from control to coherence, from competition to clarity. That's the signal the Earth is waiting on, not permission, participation. And when enough of us choose it not perfectly, but consistently, then what once sounded like spiritual fiction becomes the new physics of reality. The future won't be televised. It will be felt in how we treat each other, in how we build systems, in how we show up when no one's watching. And perhaps, most importantly, in how we remember who we truly are. Not cogs in an algorithm, not spectators in a crumbling system, not atoms in random drift, but stardust with agency. Now go, live like your light has mass. Think like your thoughts shape orbit. Choose like your nervous system is a technology of the future. Because it is. And the future is listening.